Growing weary of running from room to room, practicing one-tooth insurance-driven dentistry? Then stay tuned for the latest episode of The Lionhearted, where Dr. Stephen Rasner will hand you the blueprint for what many call the gold standard of general practice dentistry.
Hi everyone, it's Dr. Steve Rasner, and yes, you're tuned in to The Lionhearted Dentist. And here we are. This is kind of an exciting podcast for me and an exciting time because I'm feeling pretty good about where we're going as an industry, and I'm saying that to you with so many of us carried so much of a heavy heart for the last 3 months as we all try to find our ways through this terrible pandemic that's afflicted everyone globally. And I personally have been back about 5 weeks at this point, albeit many of those weeks have been what everybody's calling a soft opening, with a couple weeks with no hygiene. And even now I have 2 hygienists each day, but they're not seeing the same amount of patients that they were seeing. And of course, I'm not seeing the same amount of patients, but even with that, I've had enough time in at this point to make a lot of observations that I think will help you. And, the first thing I want to tell you is for the next several podcasts, I'm going to start to move away from the weekly, what should we be doing with regard to the corona in our practices. And I'm going to get back to what I think you need to hear again. Maybe a different version in some of my earlier podcasts with regard to getting the practice of your dream, with that shockingly, astonishingly, is still there to be had in spite of everything that's going on in our world. I know that I speak to a wide range of you because I get a lot of emails from you. And I know some of you are D3 and 4 students. Some of you are early startup practices. A lot of you have been out there as long as I have been out, and you still love it, and you still want to dream. And I think that's who tunes in weekly to these podcasts, because we share that. I can tell by the so many letters I get from you guys. And remember, I can't believe that I'm actually approaching 2 years of doing this. And, all I am is one of you. With probably a similar story. I wasn't magna cum laude of my class by any stretch of the imagination. I've had to work really, really hard. I made a lot of mistakes and still was able to carve out what a lot of colleagues would love to aspire to in their own world. And so I never come off to you, and you know it. Like, everything I say is gospel, and nobody should do that to you anyway. So we're going to start to break away during this podcast, and with several to follow, as if you hired me to come to your practice and said, hey man, I want what you have. Tell me how to get there. Because I'm not kidding when I say this to you. It's just so straight up easy to me as to what you should be doing. I'm not saying the actual work required is easy, but to have a pretty cool practice many, many years into this, no matter where you are in the world or the United States, is indeed a thing a lot of us would love to have. I'm here to help give you that. So first thing I'm going to mention to you is, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. I told you that 2020 is a weird year. I usually give about 6 courses a year in my office, all surgical courses. And shout out to my colleague in Montana who signed on for my October implant course. Just saying hi. The courses I've really put a lot of work and effort into it. I don't need to go into my commiserating with you whether it's even worth it, because obviously I don't do it just for money, or I'd have a big institute, which I have the space to build. I limit it to somewhere between 6 and tops of 12 doctors. And you don't need a license in my state of New Jersey to take these courses and work live on patients. You're doing the work. You're not watching me. You'll watch me a little bit to say, replicate this if you want. It's whatever level is comfortable for you. And I know how important this is in acquiring a skill set that I know you need to get to this point of a practice that many of you know that I have, and many of that you have. So because of what happened this year, I had to cancel 2 of the courses. I fast forwarded most of the people to the October courses. So be sure to write Beth or myself and inquire, because there are a couple openings, because some people had conflicts in the 2 dates we have left for this year. So there's 1 implant course left, and there's 1 2-day, they're both 2 days, atraumatic extraction and bone grafting course. And you will leave those courses with some serious skills. You're not going to go back to your practice. Let me tell you something. I took a course this year, one of my last courses before the break, and it is no fault of the doctor, but it was a very different approach to GBR, guided bone regeneration, and really was exciting, and it was taught beautifully. And I was mesmerized by the whole procedure because it's something I hadn't done. And I got back, and I'm very tentative with it. And in fact, I used it one time and it was a complete failure. And it's not the fault of the doctor. It's a little higher level of bone grafting using autogenous bone blocks. That being said, that's not going to happen in my practice, because I'm going to give you rock solid, it works every time. Not some esoteric type of philosophy on GBR that I haven't tested. The stuff I give you is stuff that you can use with confidence on Mondays. So whether it's the implant course in October or the atraumatic extraction course, which is where you need to start anyway. So one more thing I want to talk about, and that is, now where I'm 5 weeks back, I don't know if you've had this thought, and I want to share it with you for a minute. There is one thing I do know now for sure, and I do believe what I'm about to say resonates with many of the guys, and when I say guys, I mean docs, men and women, that listen to me. I'm back doing what makes me happy. Not all of us do that. Do you understand that? Not all dentists do dentistry because that's what makes them happy. Some of you are very talented at a myriad of other skills. Golfing, I'm serious. Photography, swimming, just things that you got into along the way. But some of us, including yours truly, there's only like one thing that I feel amazingly confident at on so many levels. And so one of the biggest thing I was missing in the 3 months I was out, which I know is true for a lot of you, was doing what I'm best at. It wasn't even the money. I didn't like losing money through this, but it wasn't that. And that's not what's attracting me now that I'm back. I'm positive of it. It's being unbelievably confident of the skills I deliver each day. It's being in charge of a team. I don't go out on the street on the weekends and walk into a store and I'm in charge of those people. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I like being the leader, and I think a lot of you do too. And I guess what I'm expressing to you is one of the things that was so hurtful to us is that not only we put our lives into this thing we do called dentistry, but we created these organizations that we were masterful in, many of us. Everything, all aspects of it. And relationships that we had developed with the people that help us create those organizations. And I have to say that it feels really good having that back. So that I know is positively true. Am I positive that the pretty steep climb that I personally have experienced back to a successful everyday dental practice 4 days a week is going to maintain itself in the fall or next year? I'm not sure of that. But I can tell you that all the principles I've shared with you now for 2 years almost I never thought about it before, but I actually got to see them in person, in action, helping me get through this horrible thing that we're going through. So, starting now, I want to start dedicating a series of podcasts to maximizing your professional life. Man, let's do this, right? I mean, I know it sounds like a rah-rah pep talk. Lots of us are not where we want to be professionally. I think mostly of what it is you don't have enough productivity in your practice, which doesn't allow you to do a lot of other things that you could be doing if you did maximize your productivity. And it's not just that. That leads to everything that's good about being a dentist or about being a professional. And that's balance. You have time to do other stuff. You feel great about what you do each day, about your confidence. And remember, this is a journey to get there. Obviously, if you graduated this past spring, my dental student colleagues, then you're beginning your journey. You know, nobody comes out of dental school. Nobody comes out number one of the best dental school in America and is ready to kill it in a private sector of business. Doesn't work that way. But it's exciting and you can get there pretty quickly. So I want to begin with that, and I would say this to you. First of all, I'm going to tell you, it's time to get on with it. What I mean is I think it's time to stop talking so much about, unless it's completely relevant about some, vaccine that's out or some new test that's evolving that allows us to have a 5-minute turnaround on whether a patient's got COVID or not. Of course, that's relevant, and there's many, many avenues for you to find that kind of information, besides mine. But let's begin with this. When I say to you, I want to help you maximize your professional life, I have to ask you, what are you looking for? And I mean it. I mean, do you really know what you're looking for? And there's a number of things it could be. It could be wealth accumulation. I went to school 40 years ago, by the way. I graduated. And a lot of the docs, and even doctors I didn't go to school with, have tremendous wealth accumulation by being very savvy in the dental industry and having clinics and multiple. Maybe that's what you're after. It's not for me, and it's not for me to judge you. I don't judge you. That led to lots of things that would never satisfy me. And it would never satisfy, I know, a lot of people that would bother to tune into the Lionhearted dentist. I know this. So, but maybe that's what it is. So, are you there yet? I mean, it's a hard thing to do. I would tell you, if you wanted to write me personally, I could tell you what my advice would be to you, and it wouldn't be to try to develop massive wealth accumulation as a dentist. You would need early investments and advisors, and really, let me tell you something. The most beautiful thing you younger, is that even a word? A proper use of a word? My colleagues on the younger side, those coming right out of school, the best thing you got going for you, man, is time. You have so much time to do whatever you want to do. And it's really important that you stop every couple months. This is such a good advice. And self-analyze as to where are you? Are you on the right track? Because you can get caught up as a rat in your little world and years can fly by. And you can do this on many levels, even as an associate and being unhappy. Don't forget how hard you work to be who you are. Don't forget that not anybody can be who you are. You take it for granted now. You passed your boards, right? You passed your boards. You got through those courses you didn't think you'd get through. Now you're a dentist and you just take it for granted. Man, you're not normal. I'm not normal. You're not ordinary is what I meant to say. So do you know what you're looking for? I mean, maybe it's clinical excellence. That was always important to me. To really be as good as I possibly could be, to be acknowledged by colleagues or by patients who would see the differences in the services that we provided. Or maybe your goal, maybe you're looking for is a balance, just a balanced, great life. And when I say that to you, look, I know this sounds like pie in the sky talk, like, oh, what am I looking for? Maybe you don't think about it enough, is what I'm trying to say to you. If we're going to start a series of podcasts on getting you to the end game, I don't care right now if you've been in practice for a couple years and you're doing a couple $100,000 and you're not even paying your bills. I don't think there's a practice with a willing participant doctor that wants to be better that I couldn't get to $1 million in 2 years blindfolded. I mean it. And I kind of want to get you back on that track because I want so bad for you to experience the joys that are still very, very palpable as to being a general dentist in 2020 and moving to the future, even with this insane pandemic we're going through. So that's why I'm talking to you this way. It is important that you be cognizant of what you want your end game to be. So one of the things I want to say to you is assessing your readiness to get to where you want to get to. And the first thing you got to look at, I know you hear me talk about this ad nauseum about clinical excellence, but you do have to look at that. You're just not prepared enough coming out of dental school. You're not even close. There's never going to be a point where you took the last course. It's not going to happen. I remember so vividly a lot of that part of my intense journey, a journey that I'm still on. I'm talking about CE. I remember taking a myriad of courses with Pete Dawson in, I believe it was North Carolina. And when you get to these courses, you meet some other group of guys that like you. And I remember at that course, way, way back in the early 90s, somebody told me about a guy out in the West Coast named Frank Spear. And I know you all know him now, but back then, Frank was just starting his teaching career with another guy that people were starting to talk about, which was John Coyes. And then when I was there, I remember hearing about Carl Misch. And when I was there for years. It just became a thing I did. And I know it's a thing that you do. I get it. And that's my point. Clinical excellence is a forever commitment. And I really got to tell you, when I have amazing weeks like I had this week, I don't mind telling you that I'm in the 3rd week of June, my 5th week back, I believe. And we had a 6-digit collection week and production week this week. It wasn't my first either. And I'm only saying that to you because I didn't even work that hard. I don't start till 9. And by 4, I'm done. And I'm not seeing as many patients because of COVID. But I know that I'm doing things that I would never be able to be on this podcast and talk to you about that are part of my repertoire. I mean, I remember when I first early did implants in the 90s, I would go home, even if it was the only thing I did that day, like one single implant, and I would feel like I was a nuclear medicine surgeon, and I dropped one implant in somebody's jawbone somewhere. I don't think like that anymore, but I can tell you that I wouldn't have those kind of weeks or days had I not made the investment. And don't confuse that I'm strictly having an implant practice, because I don't. I do significant crown and bridge. So you got to know what it is, because you only have so many hours in a year and in a day, of course, to take courses, and only so much money. So what are you going to focus on? And you got to think what makes you happy and what draws to you. I mean, maybe it's going to be occlusion. Look, when I was taking the Pete Dawson courses, I was carrying around a Doppler on my belt like Mark Piper. And as it turned out for me, that just didn't make me satisfied or fulfilled as a dentist, chasing TMD syndrome issues. And, I think it's obviously fundamentally important that you have a sound basis of occlusion for your restorative to last. It doesn't mean you have to treat dysfunction in your office. And it doesn't mean you're a failure, that you went in that direction and said, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe it's sleep disorder for you. I don't know much at all about sleep disorder because I've been too busy with what I propose to you. So let me leave it with like this early in this series of this new direction I'm going to take you. I always admired, like, remember, I graduated in 1980. I don't even know if they have this specialty anymore. I guess I should know this. But the Mercedes of Specialties was a perioprostodontist, so a dual degree doctor. And I certainly could never have gotten into that program because, as you've heard me say many times, I wasn't ranked nearly high enough to even get a decent GPR. I wasn't. But that is what I would model my practice at. Think about it for a minute. Being really good at restoring teeth and achieving a healthy periodontium. I mean, come on. It's so basic of a tenet that makes our patients healthy that who doesn't? Even if you don't know it, that's probably what you aspire to. But that's what my focus is on. It's not on veneering patients. That's not what people come to me for. I have those skills, and I've took a lot of courses with Dr. Spear over the years, and knowing what was appropriate, knowing what to do when, which is the name of one of my courses. So I have to tell you that is going to be my guide for you. So there's no mystery about it. Having a practice whose fundamental core of skill sets would include perio skills and would include restorative skills. And you could spend the rest of your career taking such courses. And again, if you ask me, I don't mean you'll be done in a year. You're never going to be done. But your skills will change dramatically early on. And look, you only know what you know. So it's really cool. I find it amazing when I'm sitting in a course forgetting how much I love learning. Wouldn't look at myself like that kind of guy, like after 40 years, but I still do. And I know a lot of you feel the same. So figure out what it is that you want to focus on, but my direction is going to be to give you what I just said. And of course, a big section of what I talk about all the time is surgical skills that I just think are so fundamental to a successful practice. So let me kind of summarize this first podcast. I spent a lot of time, maybe too much, giving you some philosophy to look at yourself and figure out, because I guess my point is I think we're done with talking about Corona every week on my podcast anyway. It's going to be what it's going to be. I'm sorry, I don't know how that sounds, but that's how I feel. I think it's time to get back in the weight room and start doing what you need to do to have the practice of your dreams, because it's right there in front of you to have. I don't care if you're an associate and you're unhappy right now and you're in a third year of 1 year too many probably. It is time to make your plan. I don't care if you're a startup or, you're struggling right now. We can change that. And that's what we're going to do over these next, and we're going to talk about a lot of things. The clinical skills required, the easiest path. Well, obviously I want you to have the shortest path to get from where you're at right now to this success. I mean, think about what I'm saying to you. I'm 65, going to be 66 in 2 weeks, right? I'm off. It's this Friday. I'm off on a Friday. I've been off on Fridays for 20 plus years. I just went through the thing that we're all going through. And my mindset's telling me to stop. Stop feeding people that listen to you what to do each week to survive, to tread water, because we're not drowning. That's not going to happen. I said it before I even got back to work. I remember saying it in an earlier podcast, and it's kind of cool to see it to come to fruition. So you can count on the next several podcasts to be back to the basics. Like, what do I think you need to do, and what should you do first to make significant, palpable change in your professional life for the end result, feeling good about your skill sets, having patients that come to you aware of that. There's so much to talk about. We got to get back in the room on treatment presentation. I mean, that is key stuff. Managing the staff, marketing. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. I hope this gave you a little positive moment this week, and thanks for tuning in, as I always say to you. And my email is Dr. Rasner, DRRASNER at AOL.com. Looking forward to getting you to where you want to be. Thanks for checking in.